This is the SSH presentation by Solidarix. Here's a quick overview. This presentation will walk through how SSH works, specifically using OpenSSH on a Linux system. I will start by explaining the lab environment and then go into the technical overview of SSH. After that, I will explain why SSH is important in real-world environments, especially in IT and cybersecurity. Then, I will cover the default port, common security risks, and how OpenSSH operates on Linux. Finally, I will demonstrate installation, service configuration, validation using Nmap, and how all of this connects to what we're learning in the lab. Lab Environment Overview. In this lab, I used a Linux server to host the SSH service. I also used a Kali Linux machine as the attacker or scanning system. Both machines were connected through a private internal network, meaning they are not exposed to the internet. The main goal of this setup is to simulate a real-world environment where one system is hosting a service and another is testing or interacting with it. Similar to previous labs like IMAPS and DNS, the focus here is on understanding how the service is run, how the ports are used, and how they can be secured. SSH Technical Overview. SSH, or Secure Shell, is a protocol used to securely connect to remote systems. Unlike older protocols like Telnet, SSH encrypts all communication, which prevents attackers from intercepting sensitive data. SSH allows users to log into another computer remotely, transfer files securely using SCP or SFTP, and execute commands as if they were physically present. SSH uses public key cryptography, which is a much more secure authentication method compared to traditional passwords. Why SSH matters. SSH is extremely important in today's IT world. It is used by system administrators, cloud engineers, and cybersecurity professionals to manage remote systems. SSH protects sensitive information such as login credentials and system commands from being intercepted. Without SSH, remote management would be much more vulnerable to attacks like eavesdropping or man-in-the-middle attacks. This makes SSH a critical tool for maintaining secure infrastructure. Default port and function. SSH runs on port 22 using the TCP protocol by default. This port listens for incoming connection requests from clients. When a user connects to a server using SSH, this port facilitates the communication. Because port 22 is so commonly used, attackers often scan for it to find potential targets. This is why understanding its function and securing it is very important. Security risks. There are several security risks associated with SSH. Since port 22 is open, it increases the system's attack surface. Common threats include brute force attacks, where attackers repeatedly try different passwords and credential guessing. Misconfigurations like allowing root login or using weak passwords can make the system even more vulnerable. If SSH is not properly secured, an attacker could gain full control of the system, steal data, or disrupt services. Open SSH on Linux overview. Open SSH is the most widely used implementation of the SSH protocol. On Linux, it runs as a background service called SSHD. This service is managed using system control commands. The main configuration file is located at etc/ssh/sshd_config. This file controls important settings such as which authentication method are allowed, which port SSH runs on, and which users can connect. Understanding this file is key to properly configuring and securing SSH. Installation steps. To install OpenSSH on a Linux system, you first have to update the package list using sudo apt update. Then, you install the OpenSSH server using sudo apt install OpenSSH-server-y. This installs the necessary software dependencies and default configuration files. Once installed, the system is capable of running an SSH server and accepting remote connections. Starting the service. After installation, the SSH service needs to be started. This is done using sudo systemcontrol start SSH. To ensure the service runs automatically after a reboot, you use sudo systemcontrol enable SSH. I also verified the service status using sudo systemcontrol status SSH to make sure it was running correctly. This step ensures that the SSH server is active and ready to accept connections. Verify port is listening. To confirm that the SSH is working, I used the command sudo ss-tulnp grep22. This command lists all active network sockets and filters for port 22. The output shows whether the SSH service is listening on that port. This step is important because it verifies that the service is not only running, but also accessible over the network. Hardening recommendations. There are several ways to secure SSH. First, disabling root login prevents attackers from directly accessing the most powerful account. Second, using key-based authentication instead of passwords significantly increases security. Third, changing the default port from 22 to something else can reduce automated attacks. Additional measures include setting up a firewall to restrict access and regularly updating the system to patch vulnerabilities. These steps greatly reduce the risk of compromise. Nmap validation. To test the configuration from another machine, I used Nmap. The command nmap-p22 followed by the Linux server's IP address, scans the SSH port. This allows me to see if the port is open and if the service is detectable. Nmap is commonly used by both security professionals and attackers, so it is important to understand how it works. Expected results. When the scan is successful, the output should show that port 22 is open and running SSH. This confirms that the service is correctly configured and accessible on the network. If the port does not appear open, it could indicate a configuration issue or a firewall restriction. How this applies to our lab. This lab helps demonstrate how services operate on a specific port and how they can be secured. It reinforces key concepts like network communication, service exposure, and system hardening. These are all essential skills for anyone pursuing a career in IT or cybersecurity. Understanding SSH is especially valuable because it is used in almost every real-world environment. Finally, our references and works cited page. For this project, I used official documentation from OpenSSH, Nmap documentation, Linux manual pages, and NIST security guidelines. These sources provide reliable and detailed information about how SSH works and how to secure it properly. Thank you for watching this presentation.